Here is my review and recap of Dexter Season 1, Episode 12, entitled Born Free. A lot happens in this episode. It is the final episode of the season, and we finally get the whole story on the ice truck killer. We get the backstory on Dexter. LaGuerta gets replaced, and Deborah loses a boyfriend. So let's get this review started. All right, this is the last episode of the season. I'm going to be doing a separate video after this in regards to my overall thoughts of the whole season. So what I'm going to do on this video is just stick with the storyline. And what we begin with in this episode is we've got Rudy, the ice truck killer, on the run from the police. They all know who he is at this stage, and the whole first 20 minutes of this episode is Dexter desperately trying to find his sister. He first goes to the yard where the boats are, and he can't figure out where she went. He's there kind of lost. So he goes back to his apartment, and he ransacks the apartment looking for clues. And that's when he notices a screensaver on his computer with the song Born Free, and you had some animals eating other animals, and he knew this was not, he made the comment that this is a new screensaver, so the ice truck killer had been in his apartment and had gotten this set up. He didn't know what it meant, though, and he was still clueless. And that's when he gets a knock on the door, and both LaGuerta and Dokes show up. And Dokes seems to think that Dexter is involved in this. Dexter has to admit that, yeah, he's involved. Because Dokes brought up the fact that he had talked to somebody and had found out that Dexter had some blood sampled earlier in that last episode, to figure out that Rudy was the killer. And Dokes found out that he did that behind everyone's back. So Dokes is now really, really curious about Dexter. He's actually been curious about Dexter for the entire season and has not trusted him. And by the end of this episode, that intensity gets ramped up tenfold. After that, Dexter is able to locate some clippings about where he was found as a child when his mom and those other people had been cut up by a chainsaw, and figures that maybe he's being led to the shipyard where he had actually been found. When Dexter shows up there, he goes to the actual container where he was found, and he opens it up, and there's nothing but bananas in there. And who shows up? Dokes shows up. And they actually scuffle for a minute, and Dexter shows another side of himself that Dokes has never seen, which makes Dokes even more curious about Dexter. A security guard shows up and breaks up the fight, and then they end up getting called to Rudy's house. The police were able to get a warrant, were able to gain access, so Dexter and Dokes rush over there to see if they can find, Dexter's going there to see if he can find any clue as to where he might have taken his sister. While he's there, he finds out that the ice truck killer had left a record player there with the song Born Free in it. And there was also a Barbie doll with a apron on that said Home Sweet Home. So Dexter needs to find out where he grew up and go to that home and find his sister. Dexter is able to locate that home. And when he's outside, he starts having memories of the past and realizes that Rudy isn't just the ice truck killer. Rudy is actually his brother, and it brought up memories of him playing with his brother. That's when Rudy comes out, invites him in for a beer. Dexter desperately looks for Deborah, and that's when Rudy realizes Dexter is not going to do this easily, so he tranquilizes him. When Dexter wakes up, he's tied up at the table. Rudy's drinking a beer on the other side, and they have some words, and Rudy tells him, you can be yourself now. You can come out of hiding. You and I together can do great things, that sort of stuff. Dexter is really only interested in finding his sister. So at that point, Dexter calms down. And so Rudy lets him go. And they go down into the basement where he has Deborah all laid out the way Dexter kills people, with saran wrap and all wrapped up, ready to go. And Rudy hands him a knife and tells him, she's not your real sister. This is something you have to do. Dexter doesn't like this. He refuses to do it. And that's when Rudy takes the knife out of his hand and goes to kill her, goes to stab down, and Dexter stops him immediately. And that's when Deborah wakes up and sees that Dexter had just saved her life. And they scuffle, and the police show up because they started doing an investigation into the property. And here's something I forgot to mention. When Batista is in the hospital, he ends up getting information that they can't ID Rudy, that he's got no fingerprints in the system. While he's there, he's got a mental patient in the same room with him, and the nurse comes in talking about how, all these mental patients go through the mental hospital, and he remembers, he asked her, do they have fingerprints at the mental hospital by any chance? And she said yes. So he does some investigating and finds out that Rudy was actually there in the mental hospital for several years and supposedly had been cured, but he was one of those guys that has that typical serial killer trait of being disconnected from society, but he had supposedly been cured and had been let out. And that leads them to look for property that he owns. And that leads the police to his childhood home as well. So the police show up as Rudy and Dexter are fighting, scuffling, and then Rudy takes off and he actually escapes the property. Dokes is very curious, tries to catch him, but he actually got away in an underground tunnel that was built on the property. So he's in the wind. Deborah is saved, and at that point, they start questioning. Doak starts questioning why Dexter was there, how he got this information, and he starts getting grilled, and that's when his sister goes on a tirade and just beats him up, saying he's a freaking hero. He just saved my life. You should not look at him that way. You need to be nicer. Just leave him alone. He saved my life, type of thing. And she did a really good job acting in that scene. I can tell you that the girl who plays Deborah, she did a fantastic job in her role in this season. And that scene, actually, she was able to let loose, and it was really well done. So after that, it seems like everything goes cold. They don't know where the ice truck killer is. Now Deborah's in danger. Dexter's in danger. They really can't go home. Well, she ends up having to go to the hospital. And then Dexter takes her to kind of a motel, and says she's not safe to go back home until they locate the ice truck killer. And then Dexter goes to sleep on the couch. And that's when the ice truck killer shows up and kind of has been following Dexter. So he's able to gain entry into the motel, sees Dexter sleeping. So he goes into the room where Deborah is, and he goes in there and immediately tries to stab and kill her. And that's when you find out Deborah's not even there. This was all a ploy for Dexter to capture him. Dexter comes up behind him and puts a wire and chokes him out. And you find out that those were prosthetics that he actually picked up from Rudy's office to trick him into thinking that that was Deborah. So Deborah is actually still at the hospital. The next scene is Dexter at Rudy's house. He's got Rudy on Rudy's contraption where he drains the blood from people, and he actually slits his throat and kills Rudy. So he drains his blood. The police show up later. Dexter's nowhere to be found, and they rule this as a suicide, that he didn't want to be caught, so he goes back home and he slit his own throat the way he did for the women. So that's kind of how the storyline wraps up for the ice truck killer. Now, there's a little bit more with Dexter and Paul, which is Rita's not boyfriend, her husband, her ex-husband. He actually he's still in jail, and he's trying to tell his ex-wife, trying to tell Rita, Dexter did this to me. If you look around the property, you're going to find a shoe because he dragged me out of the property, and I never found that shoe. She doesn't believe him. So at the end of the episode, you've got Rita outside her house, and she does find that shoe, which makes her very curious about what really happened and if Dexter had actually done something. At the same time, Dexter is leaving her house, and you see Dokes off to the side spying on Dexter. He's now very curious about Dexter. Dexter, when he fought him back, he could tell that this wasn't just a blood analyst, that he actually has some more skills behind him. And so now he's going to be laser focused on Dexter in the upcoming seasons. So that's where we end with this episode. There's a couple of eyes are on Dexter. People are closing in on him and who he really is. And we're going to find out more in the future. So what I'm going to do in the next video is give my remarks and my feelings on this season overall, and give a rating on it, and talk about what I think I would have done differently if I was involved with this, and where I think this season should have fit in the overall run of Dexter. So that's all I've got for you today. Please hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell. You will be notified when I have new videos go up. I appreciate all the support. The next video will be coming out shortly. Thank you.